Hello, my name is James Cortum. With my Complete Flute co-directors, Andrew McLeod and Marty McSully, we are so pleased today to be speaking with Leone Buyse, who is the Mullen Professor Emerita at Rice University's Shepherd School of Music. In September 2024, Leone is returning as our special guest to our second residential complete flute course. So we're so excited that she is willing to come with us. So welcome, Leone.
Thank you so much, James. I had such a fabulous time with you all 5 years ago in 2018 that I am just really, really excited to return. The sense of camaraderie that you have built as a team and also build with the participants is quite special. And I commend you for that. It makes the whole experience wonderful for me as a guest and equally wonderful, I'm sure, for all of the participants.
Before meeting Leone in 2006 for the first time when she came to Australia, I was first introduced to Leone in a Flute Talk article in 1987. And the article was Leone Buyse Pictures Success. In this article, Leone talked about the book Psychocybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz, which had such a big impact on me. After reading about it, I just thought, I've got to get this book. The essence of the book is about mental picturing and self-image, not only related to flute playing, but life. If you see my copy of my book, it's just highlighted. There's so much wealth in it. And I just see how you teach and communicate. The essence of this book really comes through.
Thank you for mentioning that, James. I had actually forgotten about that particular article, and I'm thrilled that you were helped by it. I do believe very strongly in positive visualization for all musicians. It's something that we need to carry with us. Our tendency is, of course, to be judgmental. And when I teach, whether it's one-on-one or in a group setting, such as the Complete Flute, I try very hard to emphasize the positive so that whoever is playing or listening will respond in kind.
And I'm just wondering if you would actually talk us through some of perhaps who you feel are some of your great influences.
Absolutely. I'd be delighted to do that, Andrew. I was very fortunate to grow up in a university town in upstate New York, about 4 hours north of New York City, and studied with the professor of flute at Ithaca College, David Berman, who is still alive at this moment and living in Atlanta, Georgia at the age of 95. He was the professor of flute at Ithaca College, as I said, and I was really, really grateful from seventh grade right up through 12th grade in the American system to have someone who valued establishing a foundation, a technical foundation, but also at the same time a musical foundation. We played duets at the end of every lesson, and I played chamber music with other flute students of his. And from that point on, he encouraged me to consider going to the Eastman School of Music, 90 miles north in Rochester, New York, to work with Joseph Mariano. I did attend the Eastman School of Music, and I was greatly, greatly inspired by Joseph Mariano, who himself had been a student of the great William Kincaid, principal flutist of the Philadelphia Orchestra for decades, and a student of Georges Barrère, who had immigrated from France to the United States in 1905. After my years at the Eastman School, I was fortunate to be awarded a Fulbright grant to Europe, and I studied in France with Gaston Crunel at the Paris Conservatory If you are a flutist right now listening to this, you'll think, I've seen that name. Yes, he was the dedicatee of many works that we all love to play. The Du Tuyau Sonatine, the Cinquante Sonatine, so many other morceaux de concours written for the year-end examination at the Paris Conservatory. While I was in Paris, my major teachers were first Michel Debost, and then when Rampal took over at the Paris Conservatory, I went to his classes and actually played piano for some of the classes. Rampal also was teaching in the summers in Nice at the Académie Internationale d'été, and I was there actually for 3 summers. Alain Marion was his assistant and was also an inspiration. But I feel so grateful to these wonderful musicians, wonderful flutists, yes, but musicians, and I can't overemphasize that word. We need to be more than technicians. We must think of the message that we want to convey as musicians. During my time in Europe, I went to Switzerland for a summer course with Marcel Moise. And I remember distinctly his insistence when I was practicing the 3rd movement of the Mozart G major and playing it for him in front of the class again and again. He would not let me sit down until I had done exactly what he wanted. It was during a thunderstorm one evening, by the way, so it's etched in my memory very, very strongly. He was obviously very influenced by his years in the Paris Opera, because everything that he talked about had to do with singing, realizing even in the shortest of notes, for example, the Doppler Fantasy Pastorale Hongroise, he said, a flea has as much life as a horse. And he was referring to notes with staccatos over them. And I thought that was an extraordinary image to incorporate in working on that particular aspect of the Doppler. And he really, in his De la Sonorité, emphasizes what the voice can do. He heard so many extraordinary voices from his seat in the opera orchestra, and it's very clear from how he assembled materials for working on sound, or how he spoke as he taught in the classes that I attended.
Leone, you've had such a stellar career. I wonder if you could share with our viewers a bit of your performance and teaching experiences over the years.
Absolutely. I started as the solo piccolo player and second flutist of the Rochester Philharmonic. I was 24 at the time and played for 7 years in Rochester, most of those years under David Zinman, who is a superb musician. And then I moved to the San Francisco Symphony and was there for 5 years as assistant principal under Edo de Waart. Edo and I got along very well because my last name, Buyse, which is Buyse in Dutch, was clearly a link. I speak Dutch, and it was really fun to occasionally talk with him in Dutch. We seemed to see eye to eye on a lot of things. Then I moved to the Boston Symphony for a decade, first as assistant principal, and then for 3 years as acting principal. During my first 7 years with the Boston Symphony, I was principal flutist of the Boston Pops under John Williams, a superb musician, extraordinary ears, and such a gentleman. He actually asked me if I would like to do a concerto with the Pops, and I suggested Nielsen because I had never done it. And John Williams learned the Nielsen concerto and gave me a wonderful accompaniment. So that was a real highlight for me. And on my last concert with the Boston Symphony in August of 1993, before I moved to the University of Michigan. I played Bernstein's Halil, and it was really a special treat for me to do that under the baton of John Williams. It was very special. After 4 years at the University of Michigan, I graduated and went to Rice University's Shepherd School of Music. I was actually recruited by Larry Ratcliffe, the late director of orchestras at Rice University's Shepherd School of Music. And he recruited me by calling me on a Friday at around 6 o'clock in my studio. And he said, "Why are you there on a Friday afternoon?" I said, "Well, I've just finished teaching 24 students." And he said, "What are you wearing?" Boots, a wool skirt, a camisole, a shirt, an overshirt, and a scarf. And it's 20 degrees or whatever it was. And he said, "I'm wearing shorts and a t-shirt." This was in November. So he said, "You'd have 8 students at the Shepherd School." And that's something quite special about the school. It is orchestrally oriented. There is no band or wind ensemble. And therefore, the wind studios are quite small, 8 for each instrument. And that gives each student a lot of individual time. It means that the teachers can go to orchestra rehearsals, listen and advise based on what they're hearing. And also we had very well organized wind chamber music. And it was a very, very special vibe at the school. And it was a place where I ended up teaching for 26 years. I cannot believe it. That's over a quarter of a century. And when I finally decided it was time to look at the next chapter, because I had other things that I wanted to accomplish in my life at this moment, I decided, okay, I will retire in 2023. So here I am today. And people ask me, "How's your retirement?" "I hope you're relaxing." And I'm going, "Well, actually, I'm pretty busy and I'm loving it." I feel that if you're teaching, hopefully it's because you love the subject that you're teaching, whether it's calculus or biomechanics or flute. And if when you teach, you are unable to empathize with what might be going on in any given student, I feel as though your success will be severely limited. I've always remembered my mother, God bless her, saying to me as we would go through the checkout line in a grocery store when I was little and was with her, "Now, dear, you always have to be positive and smile at the cashier, because she might be having a bad day and that would really make her feel better." So the emphasis on empathy was definitely something that I learned about very early, and not necessarily in a musical setting. I do feel that it has been part of my ability to help people. And I recommend to anyone who is a teacher to just ask yourself, am I putting myself in my students' mindset or shoes, however you want to frame it? And you may notice a difference if you start doing so more than you have up to this point. I think that a successful career can be many things. And of course, the default, or so it seems right now, is I've got to get a job in an orchestra. But there are so many other ways to find fulfillment with the background that you have as a musician. Discipline, for one thing, equips you to do many things. And I'm very proud of students who've gone on to work in technical fields because they have the discipline to really learn a new subject and stay with it. But in the music field, think about the possibilities of chamber music, of working as a music therapist, of teaching either in a school of some sort. Many of my students earn money for rent and food by going to some of the big high schools in the greater Houston area. So, however, people choose to move forward, working at some kind of job in a less than top-notch professional orchestra, just being part of a community orchestra or a regional orchestra, anything that brings happiness in terms of loving the music, because it's all about the music, really.
Some years ago, I had a student who was a very fine flutist, and after she finished, she taught for a while, and then she went to England and worked in the business world. And I hadn't seen her for years, and she came back to Sydney, and we met for lunch. And at first, there was that, "Are you disappointed in me?" And I said, "No, not at all." And because she now was head of HR for the Port Authority, and I'm going, "No, you want to be happy in life." But then I asked her, "Well, do you sort of regret that you studied music?" And the thing that made me smile, she said, "Oh no." She goes, "In my job, I have to give speeches, which I hate." And she said, "Thank goodness for concert class."
There
Yes.
you go. There you go. I just had a student from Christchurch who was working on her master's. She'd studied with Bridget and Kirsten. Transfer, or shall we say, change direction, and is now at Oxford University in England, working on a degree that has to do with religion and politics. And she was so desirable as a candidate that the University of Chicago said, "You must do that 1 year program at Oxford. We're holding your PhD stipend for you, and you will come to us in the fall of 2024." I could not be more thrilled for her. I am just so glad. And she was curious. She had a Fulbright to study in the States and chose to do it in music and come to the Shepherd School. And we had a wonderful working relationship. But I could see that there was something that wasn't quite enough for her. She needed something else. And by the way, she's now the principal flutist in the Oxford Symphony. So it's not as though she's giving up the flute, but she's finding, I think, a new cohort, people from all over the world who are in various programs as new, I believe it's a kind of master's program. And that's what you want. You want any student to be happy and feel fulfilled, whether in whatever musical endeavor they might undertake or in another field entirely.
Yeah. And they are still musicians.
Oh, they totally are. And she told me that they told her in her Zoom interview from Oxford that they were especially interested in her background, as a musician, and having somebody like that in the cohort would be really good.
I've said to people before, the flute will take you there. And
You
even
go.
yeah, it will, it's such an important aspect of who you are. And even if you don't end up playing the flute full time, your studies have been so incredibly worthwhile. And it was an interesting insight for me in the lockdown. I did an HR degree online, and they were talking in that about how thought had changed in recruitment of people for big companies like Deloitte and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and how they were now thinking outside the box and really were no longer recruiting necessarily people who had done commerce degrees as consultants. They were going after musicians, and they were going after social workers.
May I jump in with a story about the sensational Marianne Gadigian? After she was, I think, just almost through her senior year at Boston University, where she had studied with Dorio Anthony Dwyer before coming to NEC, New England Conservatory, to study with me. She wasn't sure about music as a career and walked over to the Boston University Law School and inquired about whether she could apply. And they said, "What is your major?" And she said, "Music." They said, you're in, which is quite revealing
Isn't it?
how a musician would be regarded.
I wanted to say, looking at your website, I was struck by the quote that you have there from Martha Graham, the famous choreographer and dancer from America, talking about vitality. And I was thinking that what I get from your teaching approach is this wonderful, healthy, natural vitality. And the idea too that that vitality is going to be very unique for each individual student, and that the way I think that we approach the complete flute makes this a wonderful home for this approach, because it is actually honouring that individuality, and that anything that we do in our workshops acknowledges the whole person, the spirit of the person, plus how that works with their instrument and how much freedom can be given for them to really follow their voice. So that's one of the reasons I'm very excited that you're going to be with us again, because this is, I think, quite a rare way of teaching.
When I was growing up, there were no such things as master classes or group lessons. We were all going in for our half hour or 45 minutes or 1 hour with the teacher. And now it's a completely different world. And the complete flute is a safe space. And the vitality of one person, be it the teacher of the moment or one of the players, can be shared, and it can spread through a whole room full of enthusiasts or people who are working to improve at a student level, whatever. So one thing that's so great about a course such as the Complete Flute is the sense of community and supportiveness. I mean, even the food is supportive. It's cooked by the teachers, not me. I just fly in from Houston, thank you. But it is so wonderful to have this kind of an offering available. It's unique in my experience because of the Alexander technique, maybe some Baroque flute, Brene Brown's philosophizing, which is very helpful in many situations we find ourselves, other people who have mindset very much as a specialization. So this is a unique opportunity, I feel, for everyone, all of us. I learned from all of my colleagues on the teaching faculty here. I look forward to the experience for that, as well as working with students.